Coming up next on Two Cops, One Donut.
That the people that are hiring are the ones that aggressively go out there and say, look, this is how we do the job. And we're doing it because we want to protect you and we want to protect our guys. And I think that ultimately the people appreciate that. They want you to just talk to them as if all you do is post petting puppies and showing up and doing this. The average citizen knows that's not the case. They know that there's more going on. But when you show them everything that's going on, then your citizens trust you. They know that you shoot them straight, and they know that you show them the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think that's important that your citizens see that. And it actually is important for hiring because people know what they're getting into when they come to work at Pinal County. They've seen it. They've seen how we do our job and the expectations we have. And they see the leadership in this agency doing is trying to lead from the front. So that's what we do. And that's what's been successful for us.
All right, welcome back. Two Cops, One Donut. I'm your host, Eric Levine, and today I got America's Sheriff with me, Sheriff Mark Lamb. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, brother. It's another day. I feel blessed.
That's right. Hell yeah. So you're out there in Arizona, right?
I am. Yes, sir.
Okay, so for those listening, this episode is going to be maybe a little quicker. We're going to try to keep it around an hour and a half, 2 hours, but because he's a busy man. But today we're going to be talking about the view from the ivory tower. I mean, he is a sheriff, but he's the top dog. And that is a unique perspective on law enforcement that we don't get to talk to. And we usually don't get to talk to in depth for this length of time. So it's not going to be your little soundbite narrative stuff. We're going to talk the meat and potatoes and get the perspective from a guy who's actually going to be running for I'm going to pop this up on the screen real quick just so people know. Oops, wrong one. He is running for U.S. Senate. If I can find, oh, here we go. There it is. Now he's at work. This wasn't his call. This was my call. I wanted to at least get this out there. Mark, you're running for U.S. Senate, correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yep.
That is some gangster move right there, sir. I like it. Especially being from law enforcement, it's going to be good to have a voice for us in there. But we'll switch back real quick. So first and foremost, I like people to get to know you. You know, they see the television persona and all that stuff. But where are you from? What drew you down the path of law enforcement?
Born and raised in Hawaii. My dad was actually from Arizona, but was an international business guy. I was born and raised on the Big Island. Hilo born and raised. Then we moved
to
the Philippines. Yes, sir. Then we moved to the Philippines and then back to Arizona, which is where my dad grew up, and then Panama. And then I was actually a missionary in Argentina. So been all over the place. Since my adult years have predominantly been spent here in Arizona. And I'm one of those guys. I never thought about being a cop. Never crossed my mind. Just wasn't something I grew up thinking. Nobody in my family's police officers. Nobody in my wife's family. And I had my own business at the time. I was 33 years old, and it was a neighbor that came to me and said, "Hey, you want to do a ride along with me?" And I thought, sure, why not? So it was an Indian reservation. I went out, did a graveyard shift, and we actually went on a call where there was a guy who found a 20-year-old with his 14-year-old daughter. Guy getting a little fist fight. Kid runs out the back. And on the res here, you'll have a house and then nothing behind it. Maybe an abandoned travel trailer here and there. Well, I was out there in the field armed with a flashlight and courage and walking around. And I see this old abandoned trailer. And I look up in the window. And amongst all these trees and, trash and clothes, I see what I thought was a quarter size of skin, just a little piece of skin. So I'm like, hey, this guy's right here. So they come in there, boom, sure enough, he's in there. They drag him out, tase him, putting him in cuffs. I went home that morning and I told my wife, hey, I'm going to be a cop. 6 months later, I was in the academy and started my career. So took a little bit more of an unconventional approach to getting into law enforcement. But I think that the background I've had of owning my own businesses, failing, succeeding, having lived in a lot of other countries gives me a very different perspective as to America and why I love it so much. It also gives me a different perspective to being in law enforcement and understanding all the trials and the things that we go through as humans, and it helps me make better decisions, I think.
How old were you when you decided to be a cop?
33 was my first ride along, made that decision. I turned 34 before I went into the academy. So I went to the academy at 34 years old.
Okay, so I've had this discussion with other cops before. I've always known I was going to be a cop. You know, certain people, I always call them. There's either an event that triggers them wanting to be a cop. There's family in the, in the mix. That's some sort of first responder, military, um, or there's one other motivation. Let me see. Family, tragic event, or the calling. Just always knowing. So, if you would have asked 18-year-old me or 21-year-old me if I was ready to be a cop, then I would have told you, hell yeah. But 25, maybe 30-year-old me looking back would have said, there ain't a chance in hell you was ready. You probably wasn't ready at 25. What is your thoughts on the age of starting to become a cop? Because I know it's not all 21-year-olds aren't ready, but I sure shit wasn't. But I would have told you I was.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been ready either at 21 years old. I mean, look, I feel like I might have been a little bit ahead. I would just come off a mission where I'd lived on my own for 2 years in Argentina, and it kind of but I just wasn't, I wouldn't have been ready. I think that a good age for a starting age for police is 25, especially nowadays where people are getting married a little bit later, where they don't have families. I think we have a lot of kids responding, 21, 22-year-olds responding to help somebody with a domestic. I mean, what do they know about a domestic situation,
Yeah.
or to deal with a child that's being unruly? Those are things that a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old just are not equipped to deal with for the most part. Now, you may find it a very savvy 21, 22-year-old more mature than his age says, but I truly think that getting more like 25 to 30 is you'll find more balanced men and women at that age. I think that starting in the jail at 18, 19 and going through and working those several years in the jail would be a good start and would prepare you on a much quicker level than what just going straight to the road is. So this may not be popular for a lot of those young guys, and kudos to you if you're doing the job and got in early. I think that getting a little bit, between 25 and 30 is a much better starting age for police.
I agree. And I'm coming from 17 years of law enforcement. So for me, and even growing up, my dad retired from the department that I work for. He did 30 years, and we've talked about this sipping whiskey and just sitting there. I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, I remember having arguments. This is bullshit. I'm 18. I'm ready. I should be able to be a cop now. And are you kidding me? Like, and there's some places, I don't know if it's a nationwide law now or whatever, but you used to be able to be 18 and you couldn't buy bullets, but you could be a cop.
Yeah, you couldn't take your gun home after your
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
cop. And but men and women were different back then. You were forced to be more mature at a much younger age. It's just different nowadays. It's not a knock on any of this generation. It's just they're just not haven't been thrust into some of these situations like they were. You had men going to war at 17. They were coming home
Yeah.
war, battle-hardened warriors at 21. And so they were very different type of people to hire. Vietnam veterans, those kind of guys. They were coming home 21, 22, had a much different set of life experiences than what kids do now. And I would say even more so now, kids aren't even getting their driver's license till they're 18 or more. And now they're wanting to become cops at 21. It's tough. We still hire people at that young age, but I know that they've got to do the growing on the job, and sometimes that's hard, and sometimes they end up leaving the career that they would have been good at had they started just a little bit later in life.
Yeah, yeah. That's the problem area for us as cops is that regardless of age, but your first 5 years is pretty tumultuous. You gotta learn the job and still learn how to deal with people in a different way. But hearing that your world traveled, okay, so I'm a military guy. I do know What was that?
Thank you for your service too.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it, brother. But what I have noticed is a lot of our problems from some of the younger guys, or not even younger guys, but people that haven't traveled. They don't have the perspective of what it's like outside of this country. And so they have it so good. I don't think they realize it. Has that been your perspective as somebody who's traveled a lot more than me, it sounds like?
Well, absolutely. I have a chapter in my first book I wrote, American Sheriff Traditional Values in a Modern World. My first chapter that I write in the book is Welcome to America. And I kind of go through the different changes, places I've been in life and the things that I had learned. And I said in there, look, I'm not a government program guy. I don't think, we've got far too many government programs. But if you were to have a government program that would be a successful program, it's that you make every 18-year-old go spend 1 year in a different country before they move back here. And look, you can go to the Bahamas, you can go wherever you want. I promise you, 1 year outside of this country, and you will come home and kiss the ground that we walk on. Most Americans have no idea how great America is. And only in America do we tolerate teaching our children how crappy America is, which I just will never understand. Other countries don't do that, and their countries aren't great. These countries, this country we live in is the greatest country in the world. And having traveled a lot, it really just reaffirms that. You see true poverty on a whole level, a different level. You just see that somebody born poor has no chance of ever changing that. That's not the case here in America. You can come from another country, you can be born poor, and you can still be successful. I know they don't think that, but yes, you can. America is the place that you can do that. So I love this country, and I think that it would be good if more people were able to go outside of the country. I went at the age of 19. I was sent to Argentina, didn't speak the language, had to learn the language, had to learn to just survive on my own, had to learn to travel and get them to move around on my own. And by the time I came back at 21, I was much stronger person, and I truly appreciated America, even though I'd already lived in other places.
Yeah. Now, when you were there, did you have any interactions with law enforcement? See the differences in how their cops treat the citizens versus like how our cops are?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I lived in Panama. I was in Panama when the United States invaded Panama. Operation, I can't even remember the operation now. It'll come to me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember it either.
Yeah, Just Cause, Operation Just Cause.
Hmm.
They did Operation Just Cause. We used to see how the military moved around. Like, you don't get out of line there. In different places, if you break the law or you run amok, you're going to be held accountable. And it used to be, though, as an American, I remember one day we were with my brother, and I was 18, my brother was 21, and we were driving and ended up having a road rage thing, and my brother knocks this guy out in the middle of the street in rush hour traffic, and they called us all to jail. And I sat in the jail while they took my brother to the hospital to treat the guy that he had punched. And the military liaison showed up, and he's like, look, he started chewing us out, and we're like, hey man, we don't belong to you. Don't worry about us. You can go back to your base. We're regular civilians here, and we got our own people that will take care of us. But you always had that feeling of, if I got in trouble in another country, that your country would come and help you. I don't feel like Americans feel that anymore. I certainly don't. When I go to other countries, I don't feel like my government's going to come help me if something goes awry.
Yeah, I've got travel. I'm still technically in the military. I do the reserves now, but I still have travel lists that I pay attention to that I refuse to go to simply because if they find out I'm a military member, it's a bad day. Or if they find out I'm a cop, it's a bad day. I don't go to Mexico, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. So,
like, can you imagine if I crossed the border? They'd be like, oh, you ever guess who crossed the border?
yeah, you would be a top priority target for sure.
I'm going to just stay right here.
Yeah, you stay there long enough, they may just come to you. That's what Matt Thomas was telling me.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's you always run the risk. of the cartels getting tired of you and coming taking care of business. They're very proficient at it too. So
Yes, they are. Okay, so we're about 15 minutes in. I wanna switch gears. Um, Life at the top. Okay, so you go through your police career and you manage to make sheriff. All right, that's an elected position. I'm taking it where you're at.
yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, so you get voted in. First and foremost, what is it like as a sheriff versus like a chief of police? Okay, because I know a chief of police is beholden to like city council members and stuff like that. I don't think that's necessarily the case for you because the people have spoken, correct?
That's right. The best elected official job in this country is to be the sheriff. I don't have a boss. The governor, the president, the board of supervisors, none of them can tell me what to do. The only people that can tell me what to do are the people, and so I take that very seriously. I represent the people. It was very beneficial. Like for example, during COVID, when I saw tremendous government overreach, I saw that they were locking people down and saying you couldn't go to church and saying you had to wear a mask and telling you had to get vaccinated. We weren't for any of that here in this agency. And I had the ability to do that, and nobody could say boo about it because I represented the people. I didn't work for the governor or any of them. So that's the biggest difference between a sheriff and a chief. They work for the mayor or the city council. And if they say the wrong thing, they can lose their job. As a sheriff, the way I lose my job is if the people get tired of me and don't vote me back in. But as far as me ticking off the board of supervisors or the governor or the president or any of that, it doesn't matter because they can't do anything about my employment status other than if the people decide not to vote me back in. So there's a lot of power in that, and the sheriffs that do recognize that and exercise that are a tremendous asset to their communities.
Yeah, I'm telling you, as being a cop, the more and more I see of these badass sheriffs that step up. Grady, I think, is a sheriff in Florida.
Yep.
Is he a sheriff? Yeah. He's badass, and I've heard some of the stuff you've spoken about and made stances on. I'm like, this is the type of leadership that us cops look for. Like,
Yeah.
it's badass to hear. So, I've just always been curious. Being up there, you get voted in. Now, you've got twofold to look at. You got to look at citizens' needs, but then you also have to look at your officers' needs and stuff like that. So, or I'm sorry, deputies. While you were stepping into that role, now you're coming from a law enforcement background. What were the first things for the cops that you were looking to change? That you were like, I need to get this for the guys, and we need to change or switch the culture for these guys here? What were you looking at?
So when we came in, morale was low. The guys, they hadn't gotten a raise in 11 years. And I just think they
Holy
need
shit.
some different leadership, some stronger leadership. We certainly had to get to work and try to figure out how we were going to get these guys raises and get the pay up to where it needed to be. And we wanted to make sure the morale was high. So when we came in, I was fortunate enough to recognize that Chief Thomas, if you've had him on your show, he was probably the best decision I've made as a sheriff is to have Chief Thomas in this role. Had another chief who was a sergeant when I was out here, brought in another guy. That was the only guy I brought in from the outside to work the jail. All of it was designed, and we attacked those things. How are we going to get these guys more money, which obviously affects morale as well? And how do we deal with the morale? Immediately when we came in, what we could change immediately is we did things like letting people have their goatees. We started letting them grow beards out during No Shave November. Now we allow them to have beards. The previous administration said if you had tattoos, you had to cover them. We said, look, you don't have to do that anymore unless you have obscene tattoos or something. So there
Right.
are little changes that we made that started to change the morale. But the way that you really change the morale and the culture in an agency is by consistent leadership, consistently showing that you back your people up, that you're out there for the best interests of them, that you're doing everything you can to fight for them, that you protect them from the press and all these other people. And then you also are working for their families. And we went to doing things that would get them raises. Since then, I think our guys have gotten 4 or 5 raises in the last 7 years. Obviously, as a sheriff's office, we're always going to be a little bit lower than some of the other places, but we've really worked hard to try to stay competitive with the other agencies, and those affected morale too. A lot of little things just made a difference in how they went about doing their job, made their jobs easier, like saying, hey, look, verbal warnings. Don't take reports on domestic calls unless they're actually domestic violence calls. Before, they would have to do it. If it kicked out as a domestic call, they had to do a report for it as if it were a domestic call. And I said, no, I want you guys to go and assess it. If it's not a domestic, don't do a report for it. Just do a CAD entry. So those were a lot of little things that we did, and it took a while, but we slowly but surely showed them through good leadership, through consistent leadership, that we had their back and that we were going to do what was best for them.
If you're law enforcement, stop and listen to me right now. If you're a police department that does not have an LPR system, Insight is offering the first 10 agencies, that means one agency apiece, gets one camera for free. You have to tell them that Two Cops, One Donut sent you. You heard me right. If you're a police agency that does not have an LPR system yet, or does have an LPR system, and you're not happy with the product you have, Insight is offering you a free camera. No strings attached, and they will install it. I have 10 to give out. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you, or reach out to me, and I will get you in contact. If you're a business owner or an HOA, please stop and listen to me right now. If you're just listening to the audio, do yourself a favor and watch the YouTube version of this episode to get a visual of what I'm about to tell you. I want to tell you guys about Insight LPR. It's a license plate reader. If your agency, community, or business is looking to invest in LPR to help solve and deter crime or to make your community safer, Insight LPR has my vote of confidence. I've met with their team. They know their LPRs, guys. They're the real deal. They bring over 75 years of collective experience to building LPR cameras and the software that supports communities across the country. The other thing I really like about this team is how much they listen to law enforcement. They understand the importance of working together with law enforcement and getting their input as they build and innovate products and their service to match the needs of law enforcement. In other words, when I complain or have suggestions to make their damn camera better, they actually do it. The Insight LPR team is extremely passionate and takes pride in their product development, which makes their cameras some of the most durable cameras in the market. For the gear nerds out there, what that means is this stuff's made of military grade aluminum and is nitrogen purged, whatever that means. This design makes the cameras rugged and able to withstand harsh weather elements. Here's the big selling point for me. Their nighttime scan accuracy is higher than most of the leading competitors. In my opinion, this is what sets them apart. As we know, the majority of crimes occur at night, so it's critical to have high scan accuracy at night. Insight's cameras check the box with the nighttime plate read accuracy greater than 96%. 96%, guys. That's pretty freaking high. If your community is looking to invest in LPR technology, reach out to one of their experts today, or reach out to me. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you. I like that. It is the little things for us. And I say us, the lower totem pole. Same thing. No Shave November. We got a feel for the community on us having beards. They loved it. They thought it made us more personable. That went down the line, and then they were allowed. And I think that just that one little move boosted morale quite a bit. One of the things that I think really boosts morale, and you kind of touched on it just talking about the domestic stuff, allowing guys to do the job, because for a while there we were kind of hamstringed as far as like, we're not getting convictions, we're not, and this is outside of the chief's hands, but they can have those conversations. You get a sheriff that steps in, talks to the DA, hey, like, what's the deal? This is against the law. Our guys are putting this in for it, and you guys aren't finishing it. So it's killing morale. What's going on? You figure out that type of thing that fixes, and just not doing a report. Like, that's brilliant.
We empower, and that's one of the things that we believe in. I always said when I got in here, I said, look, you give them a gun and a badge, and then you try to tell them what decisions they need to make. We tell our guys, look, follow the Constitution. That's the first rule of law. Follow the Constitution, and then just do what's right. Like, I understand that it may not go in line with the law. As long as you're doing what is right and you can explain it to me, then I'm okay with that. We used to have a law here in the Arizona, which is a mandatory tow if you had a suspended license. And I would tell my guys, are you seriously going to tow a car of a lady and a kid just because the law says that you have to. We've changed that law since then because of this to make it so where the officer may, and we took the shall out of there. But just giving your guys the flexibility to do what's right and knowing that you're going to stand behind them when they do it, that's what's key. And I'll tell you, furthermore, having good leadership really is a life or death situation. I think you've probably seen it. Most cops that are listening to this podcast have watched the guys that get hurt in law enforcement. A lot of times it's that split second hesitation because they're processing in their mind, what is this going to do to my employment? Am I going to be written up? And now, while these are split second thoughts, they're delaying their action just by that fraction of a second. We don't want our guys to do that. We want them to know that we back them up. And that's not just done by major incidents. That's done every day by allowing them to do their job, and they see that. And so when it comes time to make a quick split second decision, a life or death decision, they make the right decisions because you have empowered them to do that.
Now, I am going to speak to the cops because I want people to understand that aren't cops listening to this, how rare it is for somebody in his position at that high of a level to just articulate what he just articulated, because he just spoke exactly what is causing a lot of officers to get hurt or use more force than necessary because they hesitate, they're unconfident in their leadership, they're unconfident in their training, and that leads to higher uses of force. And that, it sounds counterintuitive, but it really isn't. When you have the confidence, you know what you can and cannot do, and it saves you time. But if you have these nagging thoughts in your head, like, oh, am I going to get in trouble on this one? Like, that hesitation slows your role in being able to handle up right then and there. And then the next thing you know, you're going to your Batman belt when you could have just went hands on or something to that effect. The higher up the chain you get, the less connected that train of thought that Mark just gave comes out. Like, so having you, Mark, say something like that, that is, the cops everywhere are going to hear that part, because I'm going to soundbite that thing right there, and they're going to be like, holy shit, somebody up top actually gets it. I'm fortunate enough, my chief, he also gets it. I've heard him talk like this, and I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. So kudos to you, brother, for you seem grounded, and you definitely seem like a cop's cop. So knowing that.
I came right off the street, right into the sheriff's office. So like, I'm a cop's cop. And for those of the people that aren't cops, let me put in what he was explaining is it's much like a dog that is always on a chain or on a leash. And when it gets off the leash, it will act inappropriately because it's never been off the leash. And so it might bite somebody because it might panic. It might bite the mailman. Where if your dog is conditioned to be able to roam freely and approach people and not see them as aggressors, ultimately that dog doesn't bite people. And that's really kind of what it's about. It's about how we train our people. And I'm not saying our people are dogs, but our ability to just say, look, you don't have a leash on you. We want you to go out and roam the property and protect the property the way that you feel like you deem necessary. We recognize that our guys are going to be able to recognize a threat. And when they do recognize a threat, we want them to act appropriately. And so we give them free rein of the property and we let them do their job. And we find, like you said, that they make the best decisions when you do it that way.
Yeah. How many guys do you have under you right now?
We have a little over 600 employees. We have 240 sworn deputies, about 150 jail staff. And then obviously we've got some civilian staff, but we've got about 50 Posse guys too. These are civilians that we give take-home cars to. They put on a uniform, they have a gun, not a reserve program. I got those too. These are civilians that actually go out and assist our deputies, whether it's scene security, transporting prisoners. I've actually been in fights with Posse guys where they've been the guy with me. I've cleared houses with a Posse guy. And these are not certified, post-certified guys, but we put them through enough training to where our insurance company is okay with them going out and responding. They wear this exact same uniform as the deputies. They have a take-home car. So that's part of our agency. And they put in about 2,500 to 3,000 hours a month, a tremendous asset to the community. And these are just people that are regular people that want to come out and be part of protecting their communities. And I tip my hat to them.
I have never heard of that ever.
Yeah.
That is
it was great. It's a
That's awesome.
because you got people driving around that think those are deputies because they're in a marked car, when in reality they're probably a posse guy. And what happens is if you get, let's say it's a major scene, instead of tying up a bunch of deputies to do scene security or traffic control, we send the deputies back out to work to respond to calls, and we keep the posse guys there. And this is a big county. My county is the size of the state of Connecticut. So if you have to transport somebody, it can be an hour there to the jail and at least an hour back. And so you got posse guys that are volunteers that'll take your 10-15, your arrest, take them down to the jail, book them in for you, and that keeps the deputy on the street in the beat. And it certainly is a huge blessing to us as an agency.
Did you do that, or were they already there?
They were already there.
Okay.
We've done is we've really bolstered that. We've really, and we do the same thing with them. Look, we give them the ability to run their organization, and we don't tie their hands. We've actually increased their responsibilities from the previous administration. We've really given them a lot more responsibilities. They used to wear different colored pants, and I was like, look, nobody cares, especially at night. They're not going to know if they're different colored pants. Put them all in the same uniforms as the deputies. The only difference is they'll have a rocker that says Posse, but the average citizens doesn't recognize that. And I will tell you, they've just been a huge blessing to us. And they come out, they work hard, and the deputies appreciate them, and they're just part of the PCSO family.
That is an outside the box idea I have never considered. I immediately I'm just like, oh God, what if but they're not taking the calls necessarily. They're backing up, correct?
Yeah, a lot of times the posse guy will get to the call beforehand. Um, like an accident. They might show up in an accident. There's nothing wrong with them starting to go to work on that. We don't let them run code. And then we don't let them arrest anybody. But if I'm on scene and I say, hey, put that guy in handcuffs, they're working under my authority. And so when they're on scene, they're working under the authority of the deputies. And so the deputies can be like, hey, that guy's under arrest, put him in cuffs. And the
Nice.
help them do that. We put them through about 350 hours of training. We make them go through our firearms qualifications just like our deputies do. And then we have ongoing training just like the deputies do. So honestly, they're basically like a deputy.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are really good. It's been great. There's some of them are a little bit older. Some of them are a little bit younger. We got IT guys. We got guys who make good money that don't want to actually be a cop, but they can still come out and be a cop by being a posse guy.
I like that. That's pretty neat. I like that a lot. It's the same here in Texas. If I'm getting into it with somebody and there's a citizen nearby, I've done it before. Hey, help me grab this guy. And they were just waiting. They were waiting for me to ask for their help. So I'm sure Arizona's the same way. We get a lot of love over here with our law enforcement supporters.
We do too. Yeah. Our
Yeah.
loves us. So
Yeah. We have a CCPD fund at my agency, which is basically a half-cent tax. They vote on like every 5 years, and it gets like 90% approval rating, and all the tax revenue that comes into the city, we get a half-cent of that every dollar spent. So the equivalent is like 64 mil a year or something like that. It pays for our cars and all of that stuff.
awesome.
Yeah. So it's a thermometer, really. If the vote gets low one year, then we're like, whoa, we got to reevaluate what we're doing and step it up so we get that vote back up.
Yeah.
We don't like anything below 80%.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's a good thermometer. So, all right. Leadership wise, you're stepping into this role. You're a cop's cop. You get this. You get some of the morale stuff going. In policing, obviously, what year did you start being sheriff out there?
2017.
Okay, so you went through the COVID. You were there before COVID, and then there through it. As a leader, did you see the writing on the wall of creating COVID officers? I don't know if that's a term where you're at, but where we're at, we call them COVID cops because the way they learned to be a cop coming out of the academy was so different than what any other cop had learned. And so you have to kind of like, as a leader, be like, all right, I understand that you guys didn't get to really be cops during COVID, but here's how you are proactive. Here's how you do these things. And you got to kind of coach them differently. Did you see that coming as a sheriff?
we saw it coming, and for that reason, we didn't have that problem. I actually was in New York doing live PD Wanted, so I would fly back every week and do the show, and then I would be out there for like 24 hours and come back home. And I could see New York, obviously they're a little crazier than we are here. And I came back to my guys and I go, hey, I think they're going to shut this whole thing down. And I said, this is a bunch of BS, so we're going to really keep an eye on this. And they did. And a few weeks later, when the governor wanted to extend it, I was like, no, we're not doing that. But I told my guys all the way along, we're not doing masks. If you have somebody at home you feel like you want to protect, that's okay. You can wear a mask, but I would ask that you not wear a mask. Even at football games, I would tell my deputies, don't put those masks on. I don't care. We don't work for them. And so our guys came in. We tried to keep the police work as consistent as possible throughout that. And because of that, I think our guys came in and we didn't do masks. We didn't do all that. We still did our job just the same as we do everywhere else. And we kind of left that up to our deputies and encouraged them to. I wanted people to see our faces when we would respond to their calls. And, people would complain about it. They would call and be like, your deputy didn't have a mask on. And I was like, yeah, because I told them not to.
Oh, that. So for us, it was, we're in the DFW. I'll put that much out there. We're in the DFW area. It's very populated, and the calls for service they did slow way down. Domestics went up, of course, but everything else slowed down. And then you just saw no proactive police work at all. Nothing. And we got hammered as far as like, just be still. That was basically how they said, be still. And so you're talking almost a year, you got these rookies popping out, and they didn't really get the police experience that I would want your first year. And once you start getting into a rhythm, it's hard to instill habits in people that didn't get them right from the get-go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we wanted to try to minimize that as much as possible. I mean, look, we still had a little bit of it, but we had so many old school guys already still doing the job. And I think the new guys would come in and be like, oh, they still just do it normally here. We didn't, I stood against the vaccines. They said I was a conspiracy theorist because a week before they started actually mandating it, I was like, we'll never do the mandates, not here, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, look, this sheriff thinks that the government's going to mandate people to take the vaccine. And then a week later, all these businesses and the government started doing that. So, yeah, we were trying to keep our finger on the pulse as to what was going on. And we kept telling our guys, look, we're not doing that. Even churches, they would call and say, hey, Sheriff, we want to have a service. And I was like, go right ahead, do it. You're covered under the First Amendment. It's the very first thing you talk about. So go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me as a military guy, I get poked and prodded with everything under the sun. I've got so many chemicals running through my body. I'm surprised I'm not glowing. So, I want to switch gears again. Policing right now, recruiting is down just about everywhere. Definitely not for Pinell County, because I have done a little research on y'all. I want to get into this part too, but because your social media, you allowing your cops to do the social media thing is brilliant, and I think it's the smartest thing you guys could do. That's one of the reasons I do this podcast, because I felt like police weren't utilizing social media in a way that benefits us. We do a lot of propaganda stuff. Oh, look, here's a cop petting a puppy. Here's a kid shooting basketball in the street and a cop come up and shooting with him. Like, I get it. That has its place, but we weren't using it to educate, to show things. And then you guys stepped up, and I think you basically took over the game for it, because there's no department that has your social media presence. And I love that. But the part that I want to get to first is policing in general. The recruitment's down, obviously, across the board. You'd going in trying to be, a U.S. Senate guy, being a sheriff, all of this. What do we need to do to fix that?
Well, I think we need to encourage better leadership. And everywhere where I go to speak, I talk about what I think is one of the keys to leadership and to hiring. Here's the first question I'll ask for all the cops listening out there. If I go and speak to a bunch of leaders, I say, let me ask you a question. If somebody were to come to you and say, hey, your son wants to join the police force, what would you say? Most cops, even leaders, Yeah, I think the key to getting people back into this profession is leadership. We need stronger leaders across this country in law enforcement, leaders that won't bend the knee. And we also need leaders that understand the importance of hiring. Now, I go speak to leaders and agencies and people across this country, and I always ask them this question. And we're part of the problem of not hiring, and then we complain that we can't hire. But if I were to go into a room full of cops and say, how many of you would want your son or daughter to do this job? Most cops sit there with a guilty look on their face because we've all been guilty of telling people, oh, no, I wouldn't recommend anybody do this job. Well, then, of course, we're not going to hire. So I've been challenging leaders, stop saying that. If somebody says, would you let your son or daughter do this job? My answer is absolutely, because we need warriors now more than ever, and we need people that are willing to step up and do this job. It is still an honorable profession, the most honorable profession, important profession in the survivability of the republic. And so I really try to change my own narrative in my own head. And that is why we started hiring, because once I accepted the fact that, yes, this is a great profession, it portrays itself on your social media, your leadership style, how you carry yourself. And so I think we are our own worst enemy when it comes to hiring. So any cops out there or any chiefs or
Hey, y'all, Eric Levine, Two Cops, One Donut. I got to tell you about my new sponsor, Peregrine. Yeah, like the Falcon. Peregrine is an advanced data analytics platform for public safety. Peregrine builds technology that transforms the way people and entire organizations interact with their data for decision making and operations. The platform empowers department personnel to create and implement effective strategies, make informed decisions in critical moments, and protect their communities. Peregrine revolutionizes data integration by transforming, cleaning, and extracting meaningful connections between data from dozens of previously siloed systems. Its user-friendly tools, applications, and data visualizations enable personnel, from chiefs to investigators to analysts and patrol officers, to access crucial information and insights in the format, timeframe, on the device, including mobile, that they require. Additionally, Peregrine delivers real-time, tailored insights and context to staff both in headquarters and in the field, allowing law enforcement officers to proactively address emerging situations, stay ahead of potential threats, and make better long-term operational decisions that impact both officers and the communities they serve. Discover more at peregrine.io. That's peregrine.io. And make sure you tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you.
leaders, make sure that you're not saying, oh, no, I wouldn't have my people do it. Make sure you're saying, yes, this is a great profession. And that'll help all agencies. But we've been very aggressive on social media. I am at the very tail edge of the Phoenix Valley. And then I'm also Tucson to the south of me. And so if I am not aggressively putting ourselves out there, branding our agency, I'm going to be at the bottom of the totem pole for hiring. And instead, because of what we've done on social media and how we've portrayed it, and we've shown the real law enforcement, we show us chasing people, we show the dogs biting people in jail, we show us tasing people in jail, we show the real aspect of law enforcement, and we don't try to hide it. We show our community exactly what it is that we're doing, and they embrace that, and it makes people want to come work here. So I think it all starts with leadership and how you go about telling people that this is the greatest profession.
I agree, because part of the problem is people are so disconnected from what the job entails. They see a small 20-second clip of a 5-minute event, whatever it is, but they don't get to see what we see every day. And I'm not doing that to float our own boat as cops or whatever, but if we're going to have a discussion on how policing is, you need to see exactly what we're dealing with every day. And I love Fridays with Frank. I'm going to have him on the pod. But just in a traffic stop, we're not talking a domestic, nothing like that. You see Frank pulls someone over and immediately talking shit to the officer or whatever it is, that little snot that was in that blue Mustang. And then the parents show up. That one video alone says everything that I want to say. But that is what you have to deal with. And if your attitude towards that is like, that's what you signed up for, well, I'm sorry. Like, that is a very unrealistic and jaded perspective that you're not being fair. You're not being fair, and you're not going to get cops to come to your area. The cops that you want, you're not going to get them to come to your area. Now, when you do what you're doing, You got guys like me looking like, I love my department, but shit, what's Pinnell paying over there? Maybe I should go over there. I mean, you know, and I've been doing this 17 years. So if Sheriff Grady too is another dude that I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should jump ship.
And you're finding that the guys that want, the people that are hiring are the ones that aggressively go out there and say, look, this is how we do the job. And we're doing it because we want to protect you and we want to protect our guys. And I think that ultimately the people appreciate that. They want you to just talk to them as if they're, if you, all you do is post petting puppies and showing up and doing this, the average citizen knows that's not the case. They know that there's more going on. But when you show them everything that's going on, then your citizens trust you. They know that you shoot them straight, and you know, they know that you show them the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think that's important that your citizens see that. And it actually is important for hiring because people know what they're getting into when they come to work at Pinal County. They've seen it. They've seen how we do our job and the expectations we have, and they see the leadership in this agency doing is trying to lead from the front. So that's what we do, and that's what's been successful for us. You mentioned on social media, from what we can see, there's only 2 agencies in this country that have more Facebook followers than us, and that is the FBI, which, by the way, they got an inside track, as we've seen lately,
Right.
and then NYPD,
Yeah.
and then number 3, Pinal County for followers. Unless we're not seeing somebody, but from what we can see, we're number 3 in the country for Facebook followers, and it's because we showcase what we do and what our guys do and the great job that they do every day.
Yeah, I'm telling, when I was going, and I'm a nerd, so I'm sorry. Part of this podcast idea was from my thesis for my master's, and that was the writing on the wall. I was like, we've got this beautiful tool, and me and another officer, we were using, this is when Facebook was fairly new, for groups, when they first started making groups. So we started using groups, and we were using it for our beat, and then we would use that group in our beat to send out messages. Hey, here's a guy that's been pulling on door handles. Here's this, here's that. Well, one day the NPO, my buddy, he puts out a picture of a guy that was going around pulling handles. It was 2 kids. They were like 16, 17 years old. But from the photo, we couldn't tell. They could have been 16. They could have been 22, you know, anywhere in from there. But we were letting everybody know, hey, go check your cars right now. These kids are actually pulling handles as we speak. It was a new way to use social media. Well, some dummy that lives in that area was an attorney, and he said, oh, that's a violation. That's a juvenile. You can't post pictures of juveniles. We didn't know they were juveniles. So that's our defense. And 2, like, we're actively helping the community, trying to do something new and outside the box. Well, the community chirped back right away. Our chief pulled us from, he's not our chief anymore, but he pulled us from social media, said, no, nobody's using it. Don't use social media. And I was against that. And then a citizen, an 84-year-old lady, stood up. She goes, if I'm on Facebook, he needs to be on Facebook, and y'all need to be on Facebook. And that's where the idea kind of sparked from. I'm like, you know what? She's right. You know, and you guys took kind of the idea that I had, and you ran with it in a totally even more vibrant way than I was considering it. Like you guys have your own episode of Cops, basically, is what you're doing with Frank.
Yeah, we you know, and we were on live PD, and so we had a different. I come from a marketing background, business background, and so I believe that you market your agency, you brand it, and I don't think like a traditional cop. And you know, we've had to break through some of our hard ingrained mindsets here at this agency, but they have seen the value of what we do, and you know, these crazy ideas I have sometimes. And the other thing that we did is early on, my people would come to me and they go, oh, so-and-so posted this on social media. What should we do? And we're like, we're not going to do anything. It's her social media or his social media. I don't care. As a matter of fact, I tell them, if you're not posting something inappropriate, I don't want you to blur the patch out. I want people to know where you work. We're not afraid of it.
Yeah.
So what we've done is really just condition our folks. And, you know, every now and then you got a couple posts where you're just like, hey, you know, it's you're borderline there.
Yeah. Bad form.
Really, we've given them the freedom to say, look, we want you to promote the agency. We want you to be proud of the career that you have and post pictures. Don't post pictures on crime scenes. And I don't care if you post pictures of you at work. We just don't want it to be crime scenes at work. And we have really found a good balance, and our employees are they're adults. Once again, it goes back to you give them a gun and a badge, but then you don't let them post on social media, which I think is a First Amendment violation. Just because they work for me, they don't get their First Amendment rights anymore. No, I don't agree with that. And so all we've asked is, hey, please just remember, you work for the agency. We want to build this agency up. We encourage you not to blur out the patch. Just do it in a respectful manner and nothing inappropriate. And our guys do a great job at that.
Yeah, they do. Like I said, I love Frank, man. That's my boy. With matter of fact, ever since I interviewed Matt, Matt, Frank, Brandon, Griffin, or Griffith. I always say his last name wrong. He's another one. He does the AED thing for his nonprofit with you. So we've been on a little text chain and just bullshit and cutting it up the whole time. And I was like, we got to leave the sheriff out of this, because I don't want him to be associated with all the shenanigans that we're doing over here. We got your back. But all right, let's switch gears again. Policing, the bad, okay, the bad that you're seeing out there. Whether you think it's the cops doing bad or you think it's being bad done to the cops. If let's say you do elevate and you get into this next leadership role, what is your mission going to be for police?
Well, I think you always support law enforcement. I think there's a federal level. So just so you know, there's Senate, U.S. Senate should not be involved in local law enforcement. The federal government should not be involved in local government. So as a U.S. Senator, really what your job is to make sure that the federal law enforcement agencies, which I think there's got to be some weighing out whether they should even exist, some of them, but I think you should certainly look and see how they're being operated, make sure that they are beholden to the people and Congress and the Senate. So on the federal level, that's what a U.S. Senator would focus on. The only thing really a U.S. Senator could do for the local level is to support law enforcement and pass bills that would work for law enforcement. I can mention one bill. There should be, just like the military has, in my opinion, where you can go get a VA loan or something like that. I think that should exist for police officers as well. You know, for example, you might have a military guy that serves 3 years and then he can get VA loans for the rest of his life. Well, you might have a cop that spent 20 years doing it and he still has to pay a down payment. I would love to see a program that applies to police as well. I know a guy who's trying to run that program, and I think it would be a great federal program for a U.S. Senator to support or endorse or to champion. But we've got to do more to support the actual profession of law enforcement. But make no mistake, if you have a congressman or a U.S. senator, you want them to keep the federal government out of local law enforcement as much as possible.
Okay, I agree with you. And you kind of nailed it on the head. Where I was going to go with that is the fact that now we could have somebody up there at least looking out for us for some of the bullshit bills that they try to get passed that are anti-cop, and try to look out for that and come from a direction. It's not that you're just protecting cops to protect them. You can actually articulate the why. Like, this is why that's a bad idea. You know, qualified immunity, for instance, trying to get rid of that. Like, you have no idea what you would be unleashing if you got rid of qualified immunity. It's very important, but nobody takes the time to articulate why.
They don't, because they don't quite understand it and because they're not invested in it. I'm invested in this profession. And frankly, politicians have been undermining the rule of law for a long time. There's a lot of politicians that want to reinvent America or change the America that we know and that we've lived in for a long time. They want to change the demographics, hence why they open the borders, because opening the borders undermines the rule of law. That's why they make a mountain out of them. Every time they take a video of a cop doing something, they always just take a snippet of it and show it to you, because that's another way that they can push for police reform or to remove qualified immunity. All of those things are designed to undermine the rule of law. And really, in particular, they're designed to undermine local law enforcement. And then you can push more for national law enforcement. The last thing you want is national law enforcement in this country. And you want to have your sheriffs, you want to have local police departments, because they understand the nuances of every community. It is impossible to throw a blanket of reform on law enforcement in this country. And that's what the federal government does. Every time something happens, they want to throw another blanket of reform on the entire profession for the actions of maybe one or two in an area where it may not, what works here may not work over here. And so I'm not for federal reform on law enforcement. I'm not for any of those things. I think all of those things should be addressed at a local and a state level. But we do need to make sure that we have people in place that will fight against those things anytime a national bill comes up.
Let me pick your brain because I've had this thought. I was an academy instructor for 3 years. My major focus when I was doing that was use of force and control tactics, defensive tactics, whatever you want to call it. That was my primary focus. And I have considered this because I love my own department's use of force policies and what we teach. And I'm sitting there and I've seen what other places are teaching, and I'm just like, God, how are we so vastly different in our uses of force? And I don't think use of force is necessarily a cultural thing. So what would you think of coming up with a national use of force policy? And I'm not saying that would be a good or a bad thing, but I would like your perspective because maybe there's something I'm not considering.
Well, I don't like it.
Okay.
The last you want to have any control over any aspect of your state is the federal government. They have proven time and time again that they are so, I mean, I always joke, I say I wouldn't let the government run a hot dog stand for me. They wouldn't know how to there's only one way to put the hot dog in the bun, and they would probably get it wrong. Yeah. I mean, they're not good at executing plans, and especially on a national level. And frankly, the founding fathers set it up different. The founding fathers put all that to the states. And you've got, I think it shows the states that have really lost their way as far as policing and really kind of overstepping on use of force and reform and all of that. You're seeing that they're struggling with the highest amounts of violent crime. And I think that they should take a look and fix those on a state level. So anytime it's talking about federal government interceding or overreaching into states and their ability to do it, I'm not for. So a national use of force policy, I wouldn't be for that. I think I understand the idea behind it. I think that we should just do a better job of electing people to represent our states and make sure that those states have appropriate use of force. I wouldn't mind if a state said, hey, look, this is our use of force. I wouldn't love it. I think it still should be my prerogative as a sheriff on how I do things, because I was elected by the people to do that. So that's a tough one.
Yeah. And where I'm coming from is I'm coming from a cop's mindset. I'm like, this is the stuff we should be allowed to do. Like, and this may be controversial to some, but lateral vascular neck restraints, like, to me, they're used in all these other countries. I watch German police stuff quite a bit because they deal with quite a lot over there. And, they're using it as a technique that it's almost like using pepper spray for them. And it's much safer because they're trained in it. And, I'm a big jujitsu guy, so learning that type of thing. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, geez, man, if I could just show people the light and show them how safe this can be done if you allow your officers to do it, but that will never happen.
Now, and I agree with you, because we should be able to do certain things. I think but that's the whole movement across this country, is to weaken, to take our teeth and our claws out. And that's their goal. Yeah. And if crime abounds, and it creates more need for federal government. And I am not a guy that thinks that federal government's role is pretty clear in the Constitution. And, look, the ATF, the FBI, all of these things, probably the only agency you really constitutionally that the founding fathers would have been for is probably the marshals. Other than that, all of these other agencies have come about since then through different presidents. And all of it becomes more government overreach than the federal government or the founding fathers ever intended. So I am a constitutionalist at heart. and I believe in less government. I believe in the states managing their own states and doing what they need to do to protect their communities and all of that, and that the federal government stay within their lane. And while I understand the want to probably say, hey, we should be able to have this throughout all these countries or through all those states, I just don't like the federal government being involved in anything or given permission. They think that they already think that they are starting to rule our lives a little too much.
Yeah, every inch you give, that's another. It's so hard to take back
Yep.
once they get a hold. Okay. Uh,
People are going to watch this and be like, what is this guy's deal?
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I'll just be happy if people watch it and get something out of it. Like that's the goal every
Yeah,
time.
it's the same way. The government should know very little about us, and we should know everything about our government, and that is flip flop. And that's just not the way it was designed to be. And crime is increasing. The more federal government and the more they push, we see more crime. And the way they do this is by dividing. It's division. Read Sun Tzu's Art of War. I mean, these tactics are right along with that, and it weakens local law enforcement. It's designed to make us look like the Keystone Cops. And I think we've got to start taking the states' rights back and emboldening our local law enforcement to do their jobs and taking the federal government out of it.
I like that. I like that a lot. I want to see where you're at now as far as technology and policing. I kind of talked with Matt a little bit about this offline. How familiar are you with these new real-time crime centers?
Familiar a little bit. I mean, look, we have Flock,
Okay.
the LPRs. But I think those are dangerous tools. They're good tools. They can be dangerous tools if you have the wrong leadership in place. If you have somebody that's not cognizant of people's constitutional rights, I think that some of that real-time policing stuff can be wrong or used inappropriately. I think if used in the right hands, they are very good tools. I mean, we've had a lot of success with Flock, and we use it for crime and crime only.
Yep.
Vehicles to look for maybe breaking and entering suspects that might have come into a neighborhood. But I am I continue to reinforce my community that I am the watchdog to make sure that nobody's constitutional rights are being violated in that sense. So I think real-time policing is good, but at borders, you start to get into, it can be very easily cross over into violating people's constitutional rights.
Yeah, we're very cognizant of making sure we don't ever do that where we're at as well. Our real time is all sworn peace officers. There's no civilians in there, and all of our cameras that are set up, they're set up in public areas. So that's how we tell our public community that gets behind it, like, hey. If you had a right to stand there and film with your cell phone, that's where our cameras are going to be. Typically at hotspot corners for traffic and things of that nature. And same thing, Flock cameras. Insight is another company that we have. But basically, for those wondering what we're talking about, they're license plate readers, and they will scan and look for cars that are attached to warrants. Any criminal activity. We're not out there looking for seatbelt violations. We're not out there like, what I would call harassing. We're not harassing. We're actually looking for criminals that are wanted by the courts. And that's how we use it. And I think that's how it should be used. And also used to supplement your patrol guys that are out there in the field when somebody's playing the name game. You need your officer focused on the bad guys that they're dealing with versus having their head buried in a computer. So we'll call the real-time crime center. Hey, this is who I've got. Here's a picture of them. See what you can find for me while I'm dealing with him.
Yep. And and I think a lot of policing has become reactionary, and a lot of it is because they're suing police officers, they're removing qualified immunity. And I think that the communities that are safer still have a very proactive policing force. And we believe in being proactive. We believe in being peacemakers. We're there to protect people's constitutional rights. We're there to protect them from the bad guys. And our idea is to reduce as much crime as possible. And then you have a few of those things in place, like the LPRs, the Flock, or any of the other real-time stuff, so that if a crime does occur, that you can find the people that did it. And really, that's kind of our mindset here. We try to be as forward-thinking as possible in the sense of trying to stop the crime before it ever ever happens, or at least keeping people out of our communities that intend on committing crimes. And a lot of that has to do with beyond police, has to do with your county attorney and your prosecutors, because their ability to hold people accountable when we do catch these folks is going to really what helps you keep your community safe as well. And so it kind of goes hand in hand. And we've been successfully reducing our crime index here in our county. And the crime index takes into consideration prosecutions, arrests, all those things. We've successfully reduced our crime index over the last several years because we work together with the county attorney's office, and they do hold people accountable when we do submit charges.
Yeah, we've been so one of the tactics that we've been throwing out there is we'll look for like a corner store that has a lot of open air drug trade going on and stuff, and we'll, if we need to, we'll apply for a warrant to survey that particular area. And then instead of the old school way that we used to do this, is you throw that fish net out there and you catch everything that moves, and you alienate your citizens and you start to violate, in my opinion, you're violating their constitutional rights, because now you're just trying to get lucky. Well, with these real-time crime centers now, and doing it the right way, we're able to, it's a scalpel. You're plucking out the cancers as you see them, and you're not doing it in that area. If this makes sense to you, we wait for them to leave and we do it in a safe area. So now the bad guys are safer, our guys are safer, and the community's safer, and we're not alienating them by, stopping and trying to figure out, whoa, what are we doing over there? Da, da, da. We know exactly who we're pulling over and why we're pulling them over. And that, to me, this is the future of policing, to go after the people that we know to be the problems and taking the guesswork out.
Yeah, I agree. And I like it. I like that. I like that approach to it. And I think it just reiterate to the people out there, it's just making sure that you have good law enforcement officials, because the technology is increasing and you want to make sure that it's in the right hands, which is why I think you got to make sure you're electing good, constitutionally minded, freedom loving sheriffs, and that you're encouraging your board of supervisor or your mayor and your city councils to hire police chiefs that are very mindful of that as well. And obviously deputies and police officers too.
Yeah.
That you guys that understand even bad guys have rights. Even bad guys have the ability, their constitution applies to them too. And so I just think that is so important. And it's finding that balance, because technology is increasing every day and we've got to apply it appropriately.
I agree. And I like people at your level. I love people at my level looking out for it, because we're the spun up dog. We're the ones that we're like, oh, look at this. Now we can catch more bad guys, because our heart's in the right place. But we need the leaders looking out for us, because you'll get guys like me. I want to catch bad guys. That's what I like to do. It's what I'm here for. But at the same time, I've got the wherewithal to step back and be like, all right, let me look at this, at my level. If I were to do this to me, how would I look at this? And if you're violating, your camera better not be looking in my house, better not be looking in my backyard. All of these constitutional issues that I would be concerned about as just Joe Blow citizens. So knowing that leaders like you are looking out for that stuff, that's great. And then I love knowing guys like me, and I work with a bunch of great guys that do the same thing. Like when we see this new technology, we look at it, we're like, okay, I see all the shiny buttons, but let me look at it with another lens to make sure we're not overstepping. And that's what I love about law enforcement, is I know so many guys like us that they do that every day. They're constantly looking at the bigger picture, and nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now go ahead.
No, that's
okay.
good. The line level guys that understand that are the most important thing.
Yeah. Now, for you, being a sheriff, you're the decision maker. Now, one of the things I'm always curious about, because something will come down the line and I'm like, who the fuck made that decision? Why did they make it? Where's the thinking process coming? You being where you're at, when something comes across your desk, do you have a panel? Do you have people that you go to with all your decision making, or do you just make it? You're like, no, I'm boss. This is what I say goes. I mean, I'm just curious how it works up there.
So I truly believe that when you're the leader of anything, an organization, a business, that you become in tune with what the needs are. And a lot of times people will feel what they need to do. This is why we're successful on social media, because I don't let people talk me out of posting a certain message. I just do it. And then they see, oh, hey, that worked out. A lot of times if you bring it and say, hey, look, I think I want to do this idea, then the cops are designed, they don't like change in the first place. And
Right.
then the second place, they're always designed to protect every angle. And so if there's any exposure whatsoever, they want to eliminate it. And frankly, when you're doing things and taking chances, there's always going to be some risk involved. And so while I do have people that I go to and discuss very important things, how we're going to go about this, I think the more people you involve, you tend to dilute what you feel as a leader needs to be done. You've got to trust your gut. I know it sounds like a funny, but you got to trust your gut and trust your experience and your knowledge as to how things are going to work out. Because sometimes we make decisions that just frankly don't make sense. And we can't tell you why we're doing it, but we feel like we need to do it. Now, having said that, there are 4 things that we always take into consideration, and these are in no particular order. We look at what is best for the agency. We look at what is best for the employees, what is best for the county, and what is best for the taxpayer. Every decision we make has those 4 factors involved. And sometimes one weighs a little heavier than the other. I've had to go to my guys and say, look, guys, I get this doesn't feel right for you guys, but trust me, there's a long-term plan. And what we're doing is right for the county right now, but we feel like that's going to give us bartering power in the future for raises. We've done that in the past, and we've ended up getting raises because we gave a little over here. We weighed heavier on the taxpayer and the county as opposed to the agency and the employee. And sometimes we weigh very heavy on the agency and the employee and not as much on the county. It's just a balance. Some decisions look clearer than others, and some just guys are like, what the heck is the administration doing right now? But I just want our people to know that we're always looking out for those 4 things and how it impacts that. And I think that's been the best guide for us. But any leader out there, and ultimately you're the leader, you're going to be blessed with whatever, some revelation, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, your gut. You got to sometimes just trust it and go with it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. Say you're wrong, move on.
Yeah, that's the important part though, is being able to step back and go, that was dumb. This isn't working the way I thought, and not just doubling down.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
yeah, I'm with you on that. So Matt is he your second in command there?
Yeah, he's the chief deputy, number 2, and frankly, I mean, he does a lot of the work. He just is. He gets it done. He's solid. He understands. He's been a cop for over 30 years, so he understands. Like I'm outside the box, and then there's Matt, who understands like how everything's been done, and then we always find just a great balance in the middle of how to make some of these crazy ideas work and stay within to where it doesn't rock the agency boat too hard.
Okay, so let's go down that road with agency ideas and stuff like that. We've seen and talked about some of the stuff you've implemented already. What other things are you looking to possibly get implemented, or what have you implemented that's showing success that you guys got going on that other people may not know about?
The social media, because you look at you have to look at what are your issues. If hiring is an issue nationally, then we've been working at social media and branding and making sure that people know where Pinal County is. And then we set a tone that makes guys want to come work here. If reform is an issue, then we are constantly going down and spending time I go spend time testifying on behalf or against bills down at the legislature. Those are things that matter to the guys ultimately. And you've got to have people that are willing to go down and do that, which is a lot easier as an elected sheriff to go down and stand against something. I look at more like, what are the issues you're dealing with? And then how do we address those? And the issues kind of change along the ways. And so we just are constantly evolving with whatever issues pop up. And if it's in the community, like if a community says, hey, we've got to have more traffic control here, boom, we jump on it. Like these are things we're very in tune with our community as well. What I think law enforcement, needs more than anything is just a steady course. We don't have the luxury of just changing because cultural concepts are changing. we have to stay the course. People expect law enforcement to stay somewhat consistent, and then you have to find ways to be different in that consistency. And so that's some of the challenges we face as leaders, and those are some of the things that we look at every day. But it changes just based on what the challenges are that we see on the horizon.
Yeah, one of the issues I'm seeing a lot that I like, when leaders like you or even my chief I've seen talk about this, is the hats that we're expected to wear versus the hats that our leaders allow us to or make us wear. You know what I mean? So I think that people are expecting way too much lately out of cops and wanting us to wear all these different hats and be, a master of every single one of them. Instead of, you know how it is for us. We wear all these hats. We're jack of all, master of none. And when we're not a master in something, let's just use grappling, for instance. When you're not a black belt in the community, why aren't you guys training in this? Why aren't you that? Why aren't you this? I'm like, well, you just a month ago, you wanted us to be attorneys and know the law and know every single law that's out there. We're still studying that, because the laws literally will stack to the ceiling. That's how many there are. And there's no attorney on earth that knows all the laws, and you expect a cop to know all the laws.
I think
You know,
I think the biggest thing is leadership in this industry has caved. They've bended the knee, and they haven't stood up when they should have stood up. And they said, "Well, if we give a little on this reform, then they'll back off." No, it's the opposite. If you give a little on this reform, then they see the weakness, they see the crack, and then they go for it, and then they'll push harder and harder. Where we have just said, no, we're doing the job good, and our guys do the job good, and we're not interested in those changes. And we've shown people that our work, so we don't feel like if the community tells me we need to change, then I'll respond to that. But as far as politicians down at the state capitol thinking that they know what's best for the agency, having never done this job, I'm not about to just cater to them. And I think in law enforcement, had we stood the line a little bit better, had we held that line, when I go speak to cops, I always say, look, or I actually speak to leadership and tell them it wasn't the guys, the line level guys that didn't hold the line. It was the leadership in this country that failed to hold the line. You caved when you felt the pressure or the social pressures. You caved, and now the rest of us are paying the price for it. And so
yeah.
I would just like to see stronger leadership stand up and say, no, this is what's best for the community and the agency. We're going to keep doing it the way we do it.
Amen, brother. I love that. I see some videos of you out and about. How often are you out there on the streets, sir?
I try to do about 10 hours a week on the road, try to get into the jail. I've not been as good about that as lately. But
Well, they stink. I don't blame you.
yeah, I try to do 5 hours in the jail, and I try to get out 10 hours on the road. Typically, I'll do it on a Friday or one of the other nights. I do a lot of ride-alongs with people. I give ride-alongs away for charity events. People will donate on a ride-along, and then I'll take the folks out on a ride-along. I love it because it gets me out to see the guys. I show up on calls all the time. I'm out pulling traffic stops on the I-10. I try to stay active and give my guys. I say, look, I'm willing to do the job too, and the job that I'm asking you to do, I'm willing to still do it, and I think they appreciate that.
Yeah, I would prefer if when you're doing your traffic stops, if you find like, a DWI or whatever it is, just make sure you drop that in Frank's lap
Yeah.
and let him handle the arrest. I'm sure he'll love that and appreciate it.
Man, there are certain things nowadays that they things have changed. It's all computerized, like they do e-tracks tickets, all this stuff. So sometimes I do have to call the deputies in. I don't like to, catch fish and have my guys clean it.
Clean it, yeah.
But
I took
sometimes they're much more. And frankly, all of the DUIs nowadays, I was great at DUIs 12 years ago, 10 years ago, but when they were alcohol. Now, 70% of our DUIs are DUI drugs. I'm not a DRE. And so you have to call somebody in anyway to kind of process those DUIs. So sometimes when I find somebody, I'm like, oh, this guy's high or something. I got
yeah.
DRE over here. So I hate to be that guy, but sometimes I am the guy that catches it and has to have my guys.
Now, how I couldn't tell, I would shit my pants if all of a sudden I turn around and I see my chief or the sheriff as my backup. I'm like, what the hell? All right, got to mind my P's and Q's on this one.
No, they don't care. They see
They don't care.
me out there enough. I'm right there and with them, you know, and
Yeah.
I they I you know they're comfortable, so they do their job regardless of me standing there. You know, they'll cuss at people right in front of me, and it's not. I let them do their job. Like I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm there to just support them, and they know that. And you know, you can feel when somebody's like, "Oh crap, the sheriff's here." The newer
Yeah.
get a little bit more of a pucker factor, but the guys have been doing the job along. They're like, "Ah, sheriff comes out all the time."
Yeah. I got that feeling when you showed up on the podcast. I was like, oh shit, he's here. It's real. um, well, sir, I have hit just about everything that I can think of. The whole point that I wanted, especially for this episode, was I wanted cops to hear you. I wanted them to know the type of guy you are, and see how you lead, and I think we really nailed that. And then the other part was I wanted citizens to see and hear a perspective that doesn't get shared very often, and it doesn't get shared at this length of time. So, I mean, we're almost at an hour and a half, and we've nailed a lot of good stuff. But is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you think would be good that you wanted to get across?
No, I think for the civilians, it's important to understand. Don't listen to the media. Don't listen to the politicians. The optics of our profession are not always great. But I can tell you the majority of the men and women that put on this badge every day do an amazing job. The media likes to highlight those few mistakes sometimes we make, and sometimes they make good decisions look like mistakes. And the reality is that the percentage of sustained complaints amongst this profession is extremely low. We are much more efficient than the majority of the professions, and we have a much smaller margin of error. We get it. We understand it. But I would say that these men and women that go out and do it every day do a really good job. And the leaders try to weed out those ones that don't do a good job and that we can see are problems on the horizon. And for all the law enforcement guys out there, man, just keep doing the job. We appreciate everything you do every day. I know I support you 100%, and I try to be a vocal voice, a loud voice, supporting not just our local law enforcement, the men and women who do this job, but our federal partners like Border Patrol and CBP and ICE and the work they are doing under the situation they're in. Just thank you for all you do, guys. And look, there's a storm in this country. We got to go straight into it, the eye of the storm, and it'll pass. This too shall pass. The seas will calm eventually, and hopefully the leaders in your organizations will hold the helm during this storm.
Yeah, you brought up a good point that I'd like to kind of touch on before we go, is the number of calls. I wish more leaders would talk about this. The number of calls that are taken versus the number of sustained complaints, and you know, the bad ones that we see, it is so vast that it's like less than 1%.
Yeah.
Of the, and then we're talking hundreds of millions of calls for service for police in the course of a year, versus less than 1% of those are ever a sustained complaint about some sort of violation or whatever it is. And then the other part that we don't talk enough about is how many cops are actually held accountable every year. In my own department alone, I can at least name one for every year I've been here where an officer has been held accountable, whether it was fired, reprimanded, or charged. You know, some have come to that. And to me, for the public, a common argument is always cops don't hold cops accountable. Yes, they do. You just don't hear about it.
And qualified immunity does not protect bad cops. It protects the cops that go out and do their job every day, because lawyers will line up at the courthouse to sue us if you remove qualified immunity. And then cops are just going to show up to scoop up to clean up the blood and to call the ME. And we'll slow play every call if you remove qualified immunity. And you could pay a cop 250 grand a year, 500 grand a year. Most guys won't do it if they know that they can get sued every call they go on. And we go on multiple calls a day that we could get sued on. And just for the other civilians, just so you understand the impact, this profession takes something from us that it never gives back. What we hope to get back from it is becoming, better versions of ourselves. But the average cop goes through between 400 and 700 traumatic experiences in their career, where the average citizen only goes between 2 and 4. And so, just to put into perspective the mental and physical effects it has on us every day, and yet we still get up, we put on the badge, we go and do the job every day, despite how the media or the politicians try to portray that. And really, we have far less negative incidences than doctors do, for example. Doctors have far more problems than law enforcement does, yet there is no oversight. They don't wear body cams. Um, so
No, they don't.
and look, we don't wear body cams here either. Our canines do, because they asked for them, and then that way, we can say we have a body cam program. But I had citizens say to me, "Why don't you have body cams?" And I said, "Well, it's expensive, and I would rather have more deputies. That's my responsibility. The community is to send a deputy, not a camera to the house." And they're like, "Well, you know what? What if we don't trust the police?" And I said, "Well, you're more than welcome to wear a camera. There's nothing that says you can't wear a camera. Why should the rest of my community pay for your mistrust in the law enforcement? If you lack trust, you wear a camera and you pay for the storage of it. And then the rest of the citizens who trust us are okay with it." And frankly, those cameras typically prove the citizens to be in the wrong and show that the citizens are probably lying about what happened, or their version of it is not correct. But we just don't have the funding for it. And we believe in more bodies on the ground, more troops on the ground, as opposed to spending millions of dollars on cameras every year.
Yeah, yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I love having my body camera because it has gotten, complaints just they're done like that. So it is nice to have. But I'm with you. If you ain't got the money for it, you you got to take what money you do have and get it where it's supposed to go.
Our county knows we're doing a cost. The reason we have it on the smaller groups is because now we can on a micro level figure out the cost, and then we can say, look, this is what's going to cost to go for the whole agency. And we just don't have that in the budget, and I'm
Yeah.
still understaffed. And so even though we're doing good on hiring, I feel like we need another 30, 40 deputies. And so I would much rather see that money spent on the deputies. And eventually, if we get to where the agency's in a position, or the county is funding to do that, we can look at doing that. But until then, I just feel like the citizens would much more appreciate an actual person showing up at their door, rather than a person in an expensive camera.
Yeah. Now, when let's say you get this position, are we gonna put Matt? Are we gonna push for Matt to put the hat on?
So I actually reached out to Matt. I said, "Matt, look, this is yours for you to have if you want it." Matt's at the end of his career, and he talked to his wife and was kind of reluctant. And I ultimately said, "Hey, look, Matt, how long do you plan on staying?" And his end date is probably within the next 2 to 4 years.
Okay.
So I said, "Look, I think if you're about ready to finish, then I think we should find somebody in the agency that plans on being here for a while." And so we did. We found somebody that we all felt really good about.
Okay.
Lieutenant, he's great. He's constitutionally minded. The employees, respect him and like him. He understands all aspects of the agency, and so I think he's going to be a very good sheriff. And so Matt will. I'll probably try to drag Matt with me to wherever I go next.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate your time, Sheriff. I got nothing else for you.
I appreciate you, and thank you for having me on. And God bless everybody out there. Stay safe and keep doing what you're doing. And God bless America.
Amen, brother. Take it easy.